morning we were carried off to Slabtown. This afternoon we're going to go to Sweettown. Now, for those of you who don't know where that is, you're about to find out. Jack, I said to Lori, is there anything I should know about Jack before I introduce him? And she said, well, interesting. He's a storyteller. And I said, he is? And she said, yes. He's been known to stand up in church and recite a 10-minute poem that he'd memorized. That's a storyteller, I would say. So we're looking forward to hearing all about Sweettown and your recollections of growing up in Lakeside.
All right, let's do it. Thank you. Oh, back it. Is there anybody here? I thought you had all gone home by now. A couple of things before I get started. I'm always impressed with the storytellers. I'm also impressed with the MC. All right. They always tell you in storytelling you should have a joke before you start. I don't have a joke, but I have a funny story. And it's to do with the library. Those of you who grew up in the 40s and 50s and that sort of thing will remember the librarian that sat there, a very stern lady. As soon as you went in the door, there was a desk, and she sat there glaring down at you. My sister took me to the library when I was a little guy, small, probably about 10. And she went to the library often, but she had me in tow, so she took me in with her. And I think her name was Miss Stevens, wasn't it? Yeah. She looked down at us, my sister, and me, and said, "Don't let him touch the books." I was in my usual disguise as a street urchin. All right, let's get going about growing up in Lakeside. This is my story of growing up in Lakeside from the late 30s through the war years to the 50s, about 20 years. Do you know how hard it is to get 20 years of life down to 20 minutes? It's taken me a whole years to chomp, get rid of it. Life and Lakeside were very, very different in those days. It all started back in England in 1922, the marriage of John Hendy and Winifred Allen, a union that lasted 60 years. Ma and Pa Hendy, Win and Jack as they were known, were English Cockneys. A month after their wedding, they immigrated to Canada and to Kenora, where their sponsor lived. Now, English Cockneys were a working class from the East End of London, England. It was said you were a Cockney if you were born within the sound of the bells of St. Mary Le Bow Church, known to the locals as Bow Bells. Yeah. Now, Cockneys had a way of talking in rhyme that had no connection to reality. Really. You'll see that in a minute. My father would often say, he was going up the apples and pears to his Uncle Ned. Apples and pears were stairs. Uncle Ned was his bed. So he was going to bed. Instead of going through the whole thing, he would just say, "Up the apples to me uncle." Dad would often drop into the rub-a-dub-dub on his way home from work for a pig's ear. Or over to the rubber for a pig's. The rub-a-dub-dub was the pub, the pig's ear was the beer. This is Cockney talk. Mother, of course, would be at home enjoying her Rosie Lee tea. Well, you get the idea. It was language that I got used to growing up in my house. Cockneys, on the other hand, do not pronounce H's. So to other Cockneys, we were the Hendies. Swedes, on the other hand, are equally as queer. They don't pronounce the letter J. They use the letter Y instead. So to most adults, I was known as Jackie. So the Swedes, I was Yaki. My dad was a carpenter. He worked at various construction jobs, such as the Tea Company building in Winnipeg and the Bacchus and Brooks paper mill in Kenora. In 1934, he hired on to the town of Kenora as carpenter, and he made office furniture for the town office. He retired as a road foreman with 40 years of service. Mother was a homemaker mostly. The only job she did outside the home was to clean the town office every Sunday night. She was a devoted Christian lady. She walked down to the Presbyterian church every Sunday, twice a day, twice a Sunday, summer and winter. You couldn't hold her back with horses. Always had to be there. In 1935, they bought a small house in Lakeside, 619 2nd Avenue. I was 4. It was up for tax sale for $400. Took them 4 years to pay it off at $15 a month. The house was tiny by today's standards, 500 square feet. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and a basement. There was no bathroom. The toilet, oh, I'm forgetting the clicker, getting carried away with myself here. Let's go back to first mother and dad at their wedding. Good looking fellow, right? And 50 years later at their 50th anniversary. Now the house. The house at 619 2nd Avenue. There was no bathroom. The toilet was out in the shed. There's the shed. Toilet on the left-hand side, the little small door. I don't know why the door was small. If you were overweight, you'd have trouble going to the bathroom. All hot water for the weekly washing or bath had to be heated on the stove. Saturday night was bath night to clean us up for Sunday. The bath was a round tub sitting in the middle of the kitchen floor. The cleanest were washed first, my sisters. Me last. Using the same water. All wastewater was collected in the slop pail and disposed of outside. Some people still use wells or even carry pails of water from the lake. If you were hooked up to the town system, the flat rate was $4 a month. The house has recently been torn down and the property is up for sale for just under $80,000.
Oh my God.
The shed with the toilet door still stands. Something's got to make it worth $80,000. At least I mentioned Lakeside was also known as Swede Town, and it had its share of colorful characters. But there are also a few English, Scottish, Finns, Norwegians, etc. The box mill that sat where the recreation center now is had burned down, and there was just the foundation remained. From time to time we would sneak over there and play among the ruins. Although it was considered to be dangerous, that didn't bother us, we did it anyway. Up First Avenue, where Dr. Daly's office is now, just up the street here, there were boat slips where many large tug and freight boats were that plied the lake were pulled out of the water for the winter. Later, the property was purchased by Max Cameron, became the family home of Bill, Don, and Ian. I knew Bill from early days, so we've been friends for a long, long time, Bill. In early days, the Indian agent had an office where Safeway now is. Then a new office was built up just up First Avenue from the inn. It's the yellow house next up the street. Native families were often seen parking their large birch bark canoes along the cement wall while they went in and did business with the agent. Before the war, all ice, bread, milk, wood, coal, groceries were delivered by horse and wagon or sleigh in the winter. We loved to grab on the back of the sleigh and slide along on our moccasins, trying not to let the driver see you, or he would chase you off. Later, trucks and vans replaced the horse and sleigh and the fun. Got another picture though. Anybody have one of these? It's a ration book. Because everything was in short supply in war years, we were issued ration books. This controlled what you could buy and how many to prevent hoarding. Foods such as meat or sugar were in limited supply, but horse meat was available. Or you could buy rabbit or fish from the local natives. Gasoline was also rationed, so cars sat and folks walked when their tank ran dry. Make do was the norm, so socks were darned, knees and bums up patched and sometimes repatched. It didn't bother us kids to go around and patch clothes. It was the same for everybody. Across First Avenue from the Camerons, next to the Elliots, were 2 vacant lots, our playground. Many a game of football, baseball were played there. At the top of First Avenue stood the old Machen house, derelict and vacant, as they had built a new house out at Shoal Lake. To us kids, it was your typical haunted house, especially on Halloween night when we were out collecting Halloween apples. Candies were rare. We were always careful to stay on the other side of the street from the Machen house. Further down the avenue, the Bent's Brewery and the fish hatchery. Across the street from them was a large open area of reclaimed swampy land that had been filled in with earth and sawdust from an old sawmill. The provincial buildings and the M&R now occupied the site. In winter, the area bay became a base for the local airlines. Always an attraction for us kids. Just to watch planes unloading freight from the north, such as Red Lake, as there was no road to it in those days. Gold bars were a common sight being unloaded, with an RCMP Mountie standing guard. It was always a busy place, as much as the supplies for the north were shipped from there. They even freighted horses by plane from there. Sedated, no doubt. There were 3 grocery stores in Lakeside. 2 were owned by the Wickstrom brothers, Alec and Rolly. Alec's store was on 6th Street, where a daycare is now situated. Rolly's was on 3rd Avenue, a half a block away. It has been torn down. Both Alec and Rolly operated on credit. Customers would come in on payday to settle up, or at least put something down on the bill, if finances were tight. And they often were. No one was ever refused groceries. Across from Alec was Bob Green's White Spot Luncheonette, with stools along a counter. Next to him, but in the same building, was Dan Raymond's grocery. And across the lane was Alan Lovestrand's Swedish bakery. Across from him, the Southward School. All are now apartments. Bob Green was our favorite pop and ice cream hangout, he being very tolerant of us kids. Lovestrand, not so much. At one point, he hired a bouncer. To clear us out if we got too rowdy or sat around too long. But it was a good place to go later on in life for coffee and donuts or Danish pastries. Folks came from all over town to buy his rye bread. The Hendy kids. Margaret on the left, Ivy on the right, and I don't know who that other guy is. Must be a friend of theirs. Baby Jackie. About 7 years later, we got out our finest clothes and dressed up, possibly going to Sunday school or something. Bunch of braggarts, and so especially the guy on the left there, I don't know what kind of a hookup that is, but I guess times were tough, I don't know. Ivy was born 1923, she died in 1988. Margaret, born in 26, lives in Arizona. And John called Jack, or Jackie as a boy, born 1931. Accommodations in a 2-bedroom house were tight for a family of 5. The kids' bedroom was so small that a double bed and a dresser were all it could hold. In early days, I slept with my 2 sisters until my illness with asthma required a move into my mother's bedroom on a small cot. Ivy married at 17, leaving Margaret with her own bedroom. I developed asthma at an early age. It was caused, they thought, by the dust and mold in the old house, and was the reason for the house to be sold to the McKelveys. We moved down the street to 515 2nd Avenue, a rental with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Moving up in the world. The asthma controlled my life, my early life as a child. I missed 3 months of school in grade 1 and had to start over at age 7, which made me the oldest kid in the class all through school. Dr. Mason was our family doctor, was called on frequently when my asthma was severe. We did not have a telephone, but next door the Cunninghams did, as he was a railroader. My mother would rush over and call when the doctor was needed, and he would come up to the house and give me an injection to ease my breathing. One day when I was about 6 or 7, Dr. Mason was called. He came and injected me, and then asked what I did while I was confined. I said I didn't do much but try to keep breathing. Reading or listening to the radio or whatever I could find to amuse myself. He asked if I liked airplanes. Of course I said yes. A few hours after his visit, a taxi came to the door and brought in 2 model airplane kits. The doctor had bought at Woolworths and sent up for me. This thoughtful act began a model building hobby that carried on for many, many years and helped fill my time. Most of the models I built in the early days were rubber-powered elastic band type, you know, the small ones that you wind them up and let them go and they crash. And in my teen years I progressed to gasoline-powered models that are known as control line. They have 2 wires that attach to the controls in them, and they go round and round and round and round like this, you know. And that was part of my collection at that point. if I was confined with a bout of asthma and no models to build, I would complain to my mother, "Mom, what can I do?" So at Christmas I got a book entitled "Hundreds of Things a Boy Can Do." My mother was wise, I'll tell you. Since my dad was a carpenter and had a workshop out in the shed, I spent many hours making things and learning how to use the tools properly. Skills I put to good use later in life when building my own house and cabin. Today, electronics has taken over the game and toy industry, but back then it was very different. Common games, and you probably all have played some of these, such as tag, hide and seek, kick the can, tippy. You ever played tippy? Two sticks. You dig a hole in the ground, you lay one stick across the hole, and you flip it up in the air, and then smack it. And the people out in the field had to try and catch the stick. Tippy. Dubs and alleys we used to play at school at recess. And, how about Andy Over? Ever play that? Yeah. You get a ball, group on each side of the building, a house or a shed, and you throw the ball out and you yell, "Andy Over!" And so they know the ball's coming. And if they catch it on the other side, then they run around the building to try and tag somebody on your team. And if you get tagged, you had to go and join their team. Here's one for you. A game of knife. This is how you play the game of knife. You get a hunting knife or a pocket knife, and you flip it off your finger, so it sticks in the ground. Then the next finger in the ground. So on, your fingers. Then you do your chin, and your nose, and your head, and your ear. Until you fail to stick the knife in the ground, and then your turn is over. Fingers are cut, your head. You talk about kids nowadays, they wouldn't believe this, but we had a guy who's quite an outdoorsman. In high school, he wore a hunting knife on his belt every day to school. Nobody said anything about it. Quite perfectly or normal. I mean, why wouldn't a guy carry a knife? He'd go to jail today. So, the other games, there are a couple other games we played. There's, wheel rolling. You go to the dump, and you get a wheel off a baby carriage or a wagon, a small wheel. You get two sticks, nail one across the bottom so it makes a T. You throw the wheel down and you roll it with the stick all around the neighborhood. Pretend it's your car. Yeah, a ball, a couple of sticks, a tin can, a knife, or a wheel were all we needed to have fun. Compare that to today's kids. Ouch. In winter, we played road hockey using frozen horse apples. We didn't have a ball, and we quite often didn't. When the Lakeside Community Club was formed in the 40s, on the property the M&R warehouse on Robertson Road now occupies, we played ice hockey almost daily. Second-hand skates from Linitsky's store cost $2. And a hockey stick from Woolworths for 69 cents. For all the equipment you needed. There were no organized teams. Just a bunch of boys having fun, learning how to skate and play the game. Once or twice over the winter, the father out at St. Mary's Indian School would phone Love Strands and request a group of boys to come out on Saturday and play hockey against the native boys. So half a dozen of us would walk out and play for a couple of hours or two, or a couple of hours. then go into the school for cocoa and cinnamon toast. Walking was our usual means of transport, never driven anywhere. After grade 6 at Southport, we walked to Central, walked to Northport, walked to high school. In winter, you could take the 8:15 XL bus on cold mornings, but most of the time we walked as a gang. I brought a prop to show you. I have a picture of it too, but I think the real thing is, oops. Down. Okay, maybe it's not on here. No, well, I'll hold it. This is the coat I wore to high school. It weighs about 5 pounds. It's all wool. I took it out of the closet because it's been in there for 60 years. And a bunch of these little pink moths and stuff inside. But I thought I'd bring it to show you because I really think it should go to the museum. What do you think, Lori? I was holding on to it in the hopes that it would come back in style. Doesn't look like it. Money was scarce. A pop bottle was worth 2 cents on return, so they were a valued find. From time to time, we would go to the show on Saturday, if you were good. The Bijou showed a lot of B-grade or serial movies. Later, we played Cowboys or War. Whatever the show was about, we played after the show. In teen years, we had a football team. Bill Cameron would remember this. We went on road trips to such far-off places as Park Street. Like they had a team called the Wildcats. Or way over to Q8 via the XL bus to play their team. It was tackle football, and the only equipment we had was a ball. Kite flying was popular in March out on the ice road to Coney. Of course, you had to make your own. Brown paper from a bag or parcel, 2 sticks, some glue made from flour and water, some rags for the tail, a ball of string, and you were all set. All parcels in those days came wrapped in paper and tied with string. And every bit was saved. One piece tied onto the next and rolled into a ball. Some of the balls could hold a couple of 100 feet of string, and they got pretty large. All kids were sent out to play, unless you were sick. There were no couch potatoes back then. Very few were overweight. We would play outside all day, doing whatever we fancied. Mothers knew we would come home when we were hungry or injured. Because mothers were homemakers, they were always around, so it made the neighborhood very safe for kids. Radio programs were good entertainment. Right after school, there were several programs for kids. Saturday night was hockey night in Canada. I'm still a Toronto fan. But I might have to switch to the Jets if they don't change their losing ways. Sunday night was family listening together night. Some of you will remember comics Red Skelton, Bob Hope, Jack Benny, Fibber McGee and Molly, Amos and Andy. 2 black guys played by 2 white guys. You couldn't do that today. Drama like Lex Theater, Suspense, The Shadow, or The Green Hornet were some of my favorites. Perhaps my most ambitious attempt at making something with a homemade diving helmet. Instructions for making one came from a popular mechanics magazine. It was made from a section of hot water tank, which I got from the dump. The town dump, you know, was in Lakeside, just on the hill east of Confederation College. It's all filled over now, of course. The tank had to be cut to fit over the shoulders, and an opening for a window to see out of. I did all that using a drill and a hacksaw. Then used garden hose to cover the edges that sat on my shoulders, and clear plastic for the window, held on with a metal frame. That's it. Garden hose was used for the airline with an adapter to a pump for air supply. My buddies and I hauled it down to the brewery dock. And I gave instructions to the pump man. Pump very slowly. Only a small amount of air was needed. So I put it on my shoulders and into the lake I went. I was holding the helmet down with my hands since I had neglected to install a harness. And I should have known you can't trust a buddy to... So he was pumping rather briskly. I finally had to let go, and it rocketed right up under the water. I made it back to shore. Proof of them, I'm still here. Find my buddies were rolling on the dock. The funniest thing they ever saw, they said, was to see the helmet come shooting up like a rocket, leaving me on the bottom. Oh dear. I realized that it worked, but a reliable pump man was critical. And a hold-down harness would have made things worse. I put it on the wagon and back to the dump it went. If you know Bob Brignall, ask him about it. He's the only other living person that was there. I had to mine a news route back in 1945. The route covered 1st Avenue and 7th Street down to 4th Avenue. 16 papers. I had to walk to town to get the papers at the office on 2nd Street, then back to my route. In winter, it was dark by then. We delivered, or at least I delivered 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In the last house on my route lived 2 spinster ladies. The house had no electricity. They used oil lamps for light at night, which made the house look very dark and foreboding from the outside. Some of my older pals told me I must be very careful delivering there, since, well, that's the, that's me going to school in my horse blanket. But that these ladies were witches. I should be very careful delivering there, because if they got a hold of me and took me in, I'd never be seen again. Into the pot I would go. Of course, this must be true, I thought, because of the look of the house. And my pals wouldn't fib me. They must know. So I would run up to the mailbox, stuff the paper in, and run, glancing over my shoulder just to be sure. maybe a good runner and was beneficial to my asthma. Did this for 2 years, 3 days a week. Collection day was every second Saturday. But what about the witches? Never collected from them. Just to be safe. They got free papers. At least they free papers, I thought. I found out later that they had been paying down at the office because I didn't come around to collect. But at 14, you believe a lot of things that are not true. It was clear I was had. 7 years later, as a delivery boy for Alec Wickstrom and Rolly, I had to deliver groceries to the same ladies, which required I'd have to go into the house. With the thought of witches still in my mind. By this time they had electricity, but there was no cauldron. There was no black capes or pointy hats or even a black cat. Just 2 very, very nice ladies. Jack was had. In my teen years, my buddies and I did a lot of fishing. My dad built a flat bottom punt, 10 feet long with oars. To us, it was the same as Gary Hall telling about the 40-foot boats. And we never went further than the Devil's Gap, entrance to Devil's Gap, or maybe the south end of Coney, rowing, of course. We mostly fished for the fun of it. I didn't care for fish, so none were taken home. If we caught a big one, usually a jackfish, we took it down to Carl Lindstrom and got 25 cents for it. Life jackets were not required back then, so we didn't have any. At 16, I got a job with the town as lamplighter. You probably didn't know they had to light lamps then. My job was to fill and light the red lanterns they hung on barricades, put around trenches or road excavations as a warning of danger. I was informed where they were, so each evening I would head out on my bike, my 16th birthday gift, with a can of coal oil, and do my job, for which I was paid $8 every 2 weeks. I now had money, and was very popular with my buddies, who mostly had none. I remember getting phone calls from them. We had a phone in those days back then, at that time, and they would phone up and say, you want to go to the show tonight, Jack? Yeah, okay. You got any money? In 1951, my dad bought property at the top of 9th Street, North Hill, and we built a house there. So we left Lakeside and became North Enders. In 1952, I came back, not to live, but to work for the Wickstrom brothers. So I never lost touch with the families I knew growing up and delivered groceries to most of them, until I joined the town utilities department in 1955. I've often said that my chums and I grew up in the best of times, too young to go to war, just the right age to enjoy being a boy. And no better place than Lakeside.